In August of 2022, Embracer Group, a global group of entrepreneurial businesses in the gaming and entertainment industry, their words, entered into an agreement with Middle-earth Enterprises for the rights to The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, as well as matching rights in any other literary work authorised by the Tolkien estate. There is a giant-ass fly in here. God damn it. Which means they now possess the ability to produce motion pictures, video games, board games, merchandising, theme parks, and stage productions from the world of Middle-earth. In their lengthy statement, they go out of their way to stress that such a purchase opens up the opportunity to explore additional movies from iconic characters such as Gandalf, Aragorn, Gollum, and Galadriel. This is all a roundabout way of me saying you should expect to see a lot more of Middle-earth between now and always, forever. You'll be dead, and this will still be happening. That's in addition to the current Amazon series, the multiple upcoming video games, and new publications. This purchase could easily be likened to when Disney purchased Lucasfilm, or when Disney purchased Marvel, or when Disney purchased Pixar, or when Disney purchased 20th Century Fox. The Middle-earth content is absolutely never going to stop, and to be fair, it never really has, in spite of Tolkien's death in 1973. A big part of keeping the Tolkien or Tolkien name alive has always been leaving a like on this video. But another thing that keeps Tolkien alive was exploring any and all supplementary material, finished or not. Tolkien published 4-book set within Middle-earth and a couple of additional works of poetry within his 81 years. But since his death, he's managed to churn out over 30 publications, many of which were unfinished works edited by his son, Christopher Tolkien, who spent decades of his life sifting through thousands of pages of handwritten notes, incomplete typed manuscripts, and sketchings. This is all, of course, before he passed away in 2020. All of these delve into the history of Middle-earth, spanning thousands of years, adding detail to events mentioned in brief in the main publications. And you know what? There's probably some interesting stuff in there, I don't know. But what I find fascinating that was found among all this was his scrapped idea for a potential Lord of the Rings sequel. Bear in mind, much of what I'm about to detail here is up for debate in the Tolkien community. It's taken from bits and pieces of his unfinished work, plus letters published after his death. So what I'm saying is, if you're caught up on whether this is all canon or not, just know that Tolkien made a conscious decision not to publish any of this in his lifetime. So make of that what you will. Set roughly 100 years after the fall of the Dark Tower, you know, the one with a big eye in it, the sequel happens in the time of King Eldarion, son of Aragorn and Arwen. The events of the War of the Ring have begun to shift into legend, with first-hand knowledge of what happened beginning to fade away. Much of the magic in Middle-earth has left, most of the elves have set sail for the Undying Lands, and the dwarves have dug so deep into more and more elaborate tunnels that they have entirely disappeared. As for the hobbits, well, this is a sad state of affairs covered in the 2021 publication, The Nature of Middle-earth. They were eventually driven further from their lands by men who were seeking to expand into new territory. Becoming transient, they end up as wandering poor folk, so absorbed in their own survival and search for food that much of the art and culture that they held dearly is forgotten. They were also hunted by men for sport, and Tolkien once wrote that they relapsed into a state of pygmies and never rose above that state. Grim! Now, if you track the progress of Middle-earth, it's a world in decline. First age, magic as hell. Oh my god, there's sparks and lasers and smoke, and there's just a lot going on. The second age, less so, but there is still a lot of grandeur to it. By the time we get to the third age, around the time of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, it's a world in decay. And you see that in the Peter Jackson movies. Crumbling architecture, ancient statues, long abandoned strongholds, repurposed for battles, and just, you know, a whole lot of old dudes just milling about. The fourth age, though, which begins with the end of the war, is set in that of men. And because men aren't as long-lived like many of the sentient creatures in Middle-earth, the only first-hand knowledge of previous events are from those who were children at the time, now impossibly old, so there's also a reliance on myth and legend. As a result of this, the lessons learnt from Sauron's defeat are becoming forgotten. Christopher Tolkien, when investigating his father's writings, came across a very interesting piece of abandoned work. 3 different versions of a sequel, the first from 1964, and the last being 15 months before his death in 1972. 13 pages were found in total, set as mentioned in the time of Eldarion. Now Eldarion, the current king of Gondor, he doesn't feature in the work, but it's said due to his elven heritage, he's not immortal, but extremely long-lived. His appearance resembles that of a 20-year-old, right up until he turns 60. The focus of the pages, though, is on one minor character from the Lord of the Rings, an old man by the name of Borlus, the son of a man who was captain of the guard of Prince Faramir. He assisted Gandalf in the rescue of Faramir after his father Denethor tried to burn them both alive, not realizing that his son was both David Wenham and still breathing. The other character featured is a person by the name of Salon, a much younger man who sits with Borlus near his home in Gondor and pivots the conversation intentionally and rather sinisterly into the growing whispers of a new evil over Middle-earth. It starts with them reminiscing of how Borlus caught Salon as a child, stealing an apple from a tree on his property, and how at the time he chastised the then child by saying that what he's doing is orcs' work. Now this comment always stuck with Salon and began an obsession with the long-disappeared orcs, involving their stories and deeds, but at the same time, he was so insulted by the comment that he considered returning with his friends to cut down the tree in the hope that Borlus might think that the long-extinct orcs had returned. This revelation startles Borlus, and he begins to wonder whether these bad thoughts still reside within the younger man. So to counter this, he elaborates on the meaning of orcs' work, starting off by apologising for the harshness of his words, and that he was sorry if it roused any hate in his heart. See, what he implied from the stealing of an unripened piece of fruit was that not only was the act itself wrong, but in doing so, it robs the world by hindering the potential of what that piece of fruit was to become. And that act, although minor, is representative of the destructive way of orcs. Salon then likens all men to orcs in this way, their constant misuse of nature, and how they don't even consider a tree's story before cutting it down, and how if trees were to make a judgment on all of mankind, he was not so sure that they would see humankind any different to that of orcs. Borlus, however, disagrees and raises how not all people act in such a way, and will only take from a tree when it is in excess of fruit. And if a small child is cold in winter, cutting down a tree for warmth doesn't mean that the tree is wronged, as this isn't done out of play or spite. Then things take a turn. Salon asks the old man if he's ever heard of the name Harumor, which freaks Borlus right out, unable to speak from his mouth trembling. Now, it's not elaborated on in the pages, but Harumor was one of the Dark Numenorians from the Second Age who pledged himself to Sauron, who's now presumed dead due to the passage of time. But his ultimate fate is unknown. Salon talks of whispers of his name, and Borlus asks whether he's answered any of these whispers. Instead of directly responding to this, Salon then presses Borlus on what he's heard of Harumor over his long life, or if in fact any of the dark whispers have drifted his way. Borlus isn't having any of this though, saying, yeah, I'm not doing this. I actually feel a change in the weather happening, as in you are freaking me out, and I'm leaving. Before parting ways, Salon offers him a few more choice words, in that, hey, if you wish to talk more about this, maybe we can catch up later, in the dark. I'll be dressed in all black, so that'll be fun, as will anybody else I happen to be with. Anyways, hope to catch you later. See you tonight, maybe. Bye. Borlus then sits by himself for a minute, thinking to himself how he hasn't actually felt right in a while. Part of that is his age, but his body doesn't hurt nearly as much as his loneliness, seeing as his son recently departed, again to sea. But that jogs a memory. He recalls how his son told him of a fishing vessel that went missing. The official report was, yeah, I guess they drowned or whatever. But in defiance of that, these were experienced sailors, and there had been no storm at the time of their disappearance. He then wonders what is going on with Salon. Is he recruiting for some kind of evil cult? Is he himself being called upon because of his first-hand experience with the evils of old? Borlus even considers that perhaps he's being lured and will then be made to disappear like those shipmen, which he thinks would make sense considering he was only invited to this secret meeting after he confirmed knowledge of these dark whispers. It's then and there that he decides that yes, he is going to meet with Salon, dressed in all black. This is despite Borlus feeling he has something to lose, as there is still some years left in him before death. But he figures finding out what's actually at work here is worth the risk. He then considers that if this calling is in fact his purpose, perhaps this is why he's so long-lived. His scent memory means that he remembers the smell of evil, and as he enters his house, Borlus is instantly wrapped in blackness. No glimmer of light from the twilight outdoors makes its way inside. And it's in this blackness he was sure he smelt the old evil and knew it for what it was. And that evil is... I don't know. This is where the 13th page ends. So unless there's some kind of Tolkien writings that we don't know of yet, I guess we'll never know what evil it was that he sensed. We'll never know if Tolkien meant Borlus to survive, or what Salon's true intentions were. Bad though, I think. As mentioned though up top, Tolkien himself realised before his death that this story was not an idea that he wished to continue, for reasons outlined in one of his letters, first made public in the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien in 1981.
I did begin a story placed about 100 years after the downfall, but it proved both sinister and depressing. Since we are dealing with men, it is inevitable that we should be concerned with the most regrettable feature of their nature, their quick satiety with good, so that the people of Gondor in times of peace, justice, and prosperity would become discontented and restless, while the Dynasts descended from Aragorn would become just kings and governors, like Denethor or worse. I found that even so early there was an outcrop of revolutionary plots about a center of secret Satanistic religion, while Gondorian boys were playing at being orcs and going round doing damage. I could have written a thriller about the plot and its discovery and overthrow, but it would have been just that, not worth doing.
Now, it's hardly my place to say that I think, in fact, maybe this could make a very interesting story, even though Tolkien thought the exact opposite of this. Though I still feel Middle-earth is a world where there could be remnants of magic and mythical beings left over from the previous ages. But even if you pushed all of that aside and made it entirely based in the world of men, the idea of ancient threats resurfacing, this time among ordinary mortals, could be fascinating. If not, a little depressing. Also, I guess if you are looking to read a story that exists in this kind of burnt out, horrible, now mostly magical free universe, well, I guess the Song of Ice and Fire series exists for that, which of course became Game of Thrones. But as I said, it's not up to me to determine whether or not these stories should be told, or even up to Tolkien at this point. The idea of this continuing is going to fall to someone at Amazon or Embracer Group, a global group of entrepreneurial businesses in the gaming and entertainment industry, their words, who's probably just going to end up making this or something like it anyways. And speaking of making, a big thank you to Matt for doing a terrific edit on this video. He always does a fantastic job, and I'm assuming he did on this one at time of recording this audio. Boy, though, would it be embarrassing for me if he did a real piss poor edit, you know? And second shout out to Asher, who agreed to do the voice work for the Tolkien letter. He's a voice actor, obviously, and he also has a couple of his own YouTube channels, including one called Concordia Jedi, where you can find more impressions, like his Star Wars audiobook series he's both writing and voicing. And that's great. Also, if you do want to support any of the stuff that's going on here, you can head over to our private Patreon like page. It's called bigsandwich.co. There's bonus podcasts, movie commentaries, early videos, all of that. Or even you could check out our podcast, The Weekly Planet, where we talk movies and comics and TV shows every Monday. It's got its own YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple, all of that, and etc. Anyways, thank you for watching this. I don't do a lot of Lord of the Rings stuff. I'm sure I got a bunch of pronunciations wrong, but the important thing to remember is that I can't change it now, and the video is out. So if you're hearing this, anything that happened in the video, it's in the video already. You can't change that. So just shut up about it, all right? All right, thanks everyone. Bye.